Welcome back to Cringy Theory videos with Mr. Bertrand. So now we are going to talk about Theory 1-6. So if you have not watched the 1-5 video yet, I would recommend going back and watching that first, just because there's going to be a lot of pre-information that will apply to 1-6 as well, especially if you're struggling still with note names or the concept of whole steps and half steps. Go back and watch that video first, then come and watch this video. Okay, so in 1-6, we are focused on creating major scales. So we've already done major scales quite a bit this year, right? So we've sung them in solfege. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do. So we now have to apply that concept to letter names. So in 1-5, we started out with a C scale, and we called C do. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And we used a pattern of whole steps and half steps to create that. And I mentioned it just briefly in the last video, but really the pattern for the major scale is always going to be the same. It's always going to be whole, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And I like to do my major scale rap, which is totally awful and terrible, but again, it helps you remember. So repeat after me: whole, half, whole, half. I'm just going to pretend that you did that as well. Anyway, so that's always going to be the pattern for the major scale. If I change the pattern of my whole steps and my half steps, I no longer have a major scale. So let's say I mix it up. I'm going to start a little bit lower because I'm feeling particularly baritone today. So if I go whole, half, starting on, that's an A. I would have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If I change the pattern, then my solfege changes, not a major scale anymore. Let's do, I'm just going to pick another one. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Not a major scale anymore because I changed the order of my whole steps and my half steps. I had a whole step, and then I had a half step right after that, and then everything else was different too. So just keep in mind, it's always going to be whole, half, whole, half. The dab at the end is optional, of course. So at the beginning of 1-6, we start out with a C major scale, just like we did on 1-5. But now we know that that is a major scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. You have to label whole steps and half steps. Now, it's really easy because the arcs and carets already show you where they are. We practice it in 1-5. Shouldn't be an issue. But just make sure that you recognize that that is a C major scale. Now, if we go to the second half of line 1, we have a major scale, but it doesn't start on C anymore. But that doesn't make sense because G to A is whole, A to B is whole. Good so far. B to C is half. C to D is a whole step. D to E is a whole step. E to F, not a whole step. And F to G is not a half step. So the end of that scale doesn't exactly line up with our whole half pattern. So it would not actually be a major scale the way it is now. So we're going to have to add something in to make it a major scale. We're going to have to change the notes. So G, A, B, C, D, and E were all fine. Those were all the correct whole steps and half steps in a row so far. So it wasn't until we got to F, or it would also be labeled as T in this case. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. F has to change. So if E to F is a half step, if E to F is a half step, F is going to have to go higher to make the interval bigger. So we use symbols, flats, and sharps to modify our notes up and down. So a flat is the one that looks kind of like, it's like a little B situation, or like half of a heart with like a sword in it, right? The flat's going to take notes lower. If I add a sharp to a note, which looks like the number sign or hashtag or the pound sign, if I add a sharp before the note, that's going to take the note up a half step. So back to my E and F. If I have my E and F and it's only a half step apart right now and I need to make it a whole step, I'm going to have to add a sharp to that F to now make it F sharp. And E to F sharp now is a whole step. E to F was only a half, so I added the sharp. Now F goes up a half step, so now I have a total of a whole step. So then my E to F sharp should be a whole step, and that is. And then F sharp to G, well, let's think about that for a second. So if we took F and G, and that's a whole step, and we moved F to F sharp, now we have F sharp to G is only a half step. And the end of our pattern should be a half step. So that's correct. So the G major scale, again, was G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then higher G. And that makes my major scale. I'm going to have to do that several other times, line 3, line 5, and then if you look down to line 6, we have another major scale that has to start on another letter name. So you have to go through the same process. If you're looking at 1.6.6, you start on letter name D, and then we have to write in the pattern, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, use your arcs and your carets and draw those in, and you have to figure out if we have notes that are supposed to be a half step or they're supposed to be a whole step, then you're going to have to use a sharp on the second note to adjust it in this case, right? So I'll give you a hint. D to E, already a whole step, right? It's not one of our half steps. So D to E is fine, and it's supposed to be. E to F is a half step. So if I have my major scale pattern, which has to go whole step, I already have to make a change. Between D to E is fine, but E to F is not okay. So you'll have to make a change there, and then there's another spot in your scale too. So I'll let you figure that out on your own. You can always send me a picture and ask if it's correct. If you want to send me a picture and remind, that's totally fine. Now, let's look back at 1.6.2. This is the second line. So here, it reminds you that a sharp in front of the note, or before the note, moves the note up a half step. You have to write in the LN, letter name, stands for letter name, capitalize please, and either whole step or half step. You have to label it. So the example they give us is F sharp and G. And we just actually looked at that at the end of line 1. That wasn't F sharp to G, it was a half step. But again, remember, because the F to G was whole step, F now to F sharp makes the space between these notes only a half step. So that's why F sharp to G is just a half step. If I look at my next two notes, I've put a sharp on both of them. I'll be nice and I'll give you one more answer here. We've got an A space, because we're in treble clef, right? And then we've got the B line, so A to B, and sharps are on both of them. So A to B by itself would have been a whole step. If I make A sharp, and B sharp, both of them raised, but I didn't change the distance between the notes. Just moved them up each a half step. So the distance remains the same, so it should still be a whole step. You'll be able to figure out the rest of them on your own, but use that same process. Be thinking, okay, my 4 half steps are mi to fa, ti to do, e to F, b to C, right? Those are my 4 half steps. Use that memorization that we did from before and figure out how we move these up and down, or moving them up, and how that changes the interval, whether we move the higher note or the lower note, and how that's going to change it to half step or whole step. As I scan down the rest of the page, everything else should be fine. We're just labeling. We don't have to draw in a whole lot, other than 1.6.4. You're going to have to draw the quarter notes in. And when you do that, just to maybe a reminder, or if we didn't talk about it before, when you draw those quarter notes in, line 3 and up, is where you take the stem down to the left. Below line 3 is when you have the stem on the right side of the note. So here's the note, and then the stem is on the right side and going up. Sorry about that. So anyway, so just make sure we follow those stem rules. If you have any questions on 1-6, let me know. Otherwise, happy theory, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day.